can't really hear myself. What? um, I want to ask you, what's something new that you have learned over the last 3 sessions? As a recap, you can recap yourselves. Anyone got anything they want to share that they learned something new over the last, or if nothing brand new, something that was very encouraging for you? Hold up. This might be hot, John. This sounds really hot.
I just found the fact sheet, the exercise, amazing. And I've talked to Dallas and say I need a copy of that to send to many people. Because the 2 things I read out, I remembered. I need to remember the others. So you're going to email it.
So she was saying that the exercise we did last week, the facts of the legislation, and she was asking Dallas to give her a copy of that because she remembers hers, but not everyone else's. Okay. You guys don't want to be my runner?
Yeah, I also found that really interesting. And on Saturday, I was with friends, and my one friend says, "Oh, you know, the way that they doing the Maori health, and you know, it's now to the other side, and Maori are now getting all the benefits and whatever." And then I said to her, "But yes, but what about the past, 200 years?" And then she said, "Yeah, but that's a long time ago." So I said to her, "Do you know when the last law was that affected Maori negatively?" And she was like, "No." I said 2019. And I wouldn't have known that if it wasn't for your brilliant...
Great. Yeah, good. Anyone else?
I found the way that you presented that particular item with the going forward and going back very visually, informative but moving too. Just how far it kept going further and further apart.
A little history snapshot from your friend from Middleton Grange was pretty good. They'd asked me to recite it, but it was, pretty good.
I found it very hard to accept that we might have diddled the people, the Maoris. Because I had this lovely one that it was a mistake with the transferring the marae to reo to English. But so I'm fighting with I don't want to be baddie and really understanding it. So thank you.
Thanks for being so honest on that, yeah.
I found it really interesting how much as Christians that we have vested in the treaty originally, that the treaty's sort of principles and idea were initiated by Christian influence, that it was the material that was promoted was drafted by Christians, and the dissemination of the information was also by Christian missionaries, and the comment was that Christians today don't understand their Christian heritage in this country and how much we're actually wrapped up in it. And that sort of gave me a new sort of sense of responsibility, I think. I thought that was really good.
Great.
Kia ora, everybody. I believe that it's really important that our children learn about the treaty, because there's a lot of children out in the community that know nothing about the Treaty of Waitangi. But I believe it's got to be done in grace and mercy and in the name of Jesus.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing those thoughts. I wanted to also just share once again why I've organized this Wānanga and Kōrero, and it's because, again, there is so much complexity to our history here, as we've learned and discussed. There's a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions, a lot of ignorance as well, and like you're saying, and not just among us, for the kids, for our children that are in this country. And because of all that stuff, our churches, which are made up, excuse me, of people who know a lot or not at all, or don't care or really care. There's a spectrum of people within our churches, and so it was important for me to try and gather people together where we can have a discussion, deeper discussions, and hear each other. And I still feel like there's things that we're taking in that either sit unwell with us, or we're ashamed of, or we don't believe, or whatever, and haven't been able to maybe voice all those opinions. But we know that they exist in our congregations. We know that they exist within our friends and our whānau. And so even if we don't get everything answered, or everything asked, I should say, in this 4 weeks, I hope, if nothing else, we go away. So my church folk know we're continuing to journey this. But the rest of you, excuse me, hope that you go away into your communities and your churches, and can help facilitate these conversations more, and just help show the compassion and grace that it takes to listen to one another as well. Who did anyone take the opportunity to listen to my podcast in that off week with Donald Scott? Did anyone get a chance to do that? Oh, you had? Great. If you didn't, that's fine. I'm not going to judge you. You still can, though. It's on there forever. So that's good internet. But there's something I wanted to share. There was a comment that he made. Oh, thanks. I've got, yeah, thanks. I might as well have two. That's fine. Thank you. Yeah. There's a comment that he made in our discussion about a woman that he was talking with. I think she was part of his church at the time. Māori woman, about how what it means to be bicultural, which the treaty is the groundwork and the foundation for bicultural togetherness. And she says, every time I step off the marae, or even out of my house, I'm forced to be bicultural. The world, the society that we've built here as Pākehā, having the government that we've set up, the domination of numbers, sheerly, like the what am I trying to say? Population forces a change of what becomes the dominant culture. And over the 200 years or so, we have become a place where we have made, by default, Māori to be bicultural every time they go anywhere or do anything. And so she's had to learn to become as comfortable in any setting, at the supermarket, the movie theater, school, church, as she is in her home and on her marae. And that really hit me, because I don't feel as comfortable on a marae as I do in my daily life. I had a really interesting recent experience where I got quite traumatized on my last trip to marae. But that just really stuck with me. And if we can, in our churches, make our churches a bit of a place that feels a little bit more like home, a little bit more bicultural, where there's an effort shown, that they, anyone that comes, that there's an effort to share this place, share the language, share the culture, in a place where we Pākehā have dominated the cultural shift, so to speak. I think as a Christian, the considerate, the compassionate, the loving thing to do would be the self-sacrificial thing to do would be to make space. Kia ora. So that's why we're doing this. And this is our last week. And we thought we might have a little bit more fun this week, hopefully, and have some fun. What's next? I lost my thing. We're a video. Oh, question. We'll go to video in a minute. Before we get to the question, what was your name over there that spoke? Sorry? John. John? John. Thank you. I'm glad that you said what you said. It made me think of my question, which is, do you believe that God was involved in the treaty process? Just an open sort of floor question. Because, or maybe before this, you may have thought it was simply just English involved in it, or the Crown's behest, or even you could say missionaries had their hand in it, but was God actually invested in it? And I think that's the question to think. I want you to ask yourself. You can answer from the floor if you like. Yes, no, maybe so. We have an of course. I don't know if everyone thinks the same on this. That's why I'm generally asking. Do we believe that God was involved in the treaty process?
I mean, if you want to know if I think that God led it, no. But as far as I'm concerned, God is involved in some way in everything that occurs.
Good answer. Okay. Yeah.
But I do think God was involved in the sense that, I think that God was involved in the sense that before the treaty could come to pass, God had to change hearts, because before in most other countries, the indigenous populations were either killed or just subjugated, or if there was a treaty, that it definitely wasn't the same as the treaty that we have. And that was because God had changed hearts so that people had a different view.
Okay, good answer. Yeah. Yeah, so to clarify, we're talking about, the Christian God, right? God of the Bible. Was God involved in the treaty process? Yeah. Generally, I'm feeling a consensus of, probably some capacity. John at the back's got something to say.
Well, the treaty is a covenant, right? So as a covenant, God is automatically involved.
Well, I think you can make covenants without God.
I don't think you can. I think secular people think they can, but at the end of the day, God's always involved when you enter into a contract with someone else. There's an honor to it that God becomes a part of.
Okay, thanks. Cool. Well, one more. Round two.
The Maori people knew their Bible, and they knew what covenant was in the Bible, and they believed that the Christian God was part of it.
Yeah. That's a good distinction. Do you believe that the Maori believed that God was involved in this treaty? And that alone is a yeah. So okay, that's good. We'll hold on to that, and then and we'll watch this video. Oh, sorry. Let Bruce explain it. Yeah, set it up.
Just out of curiosity, was anybody on the treaty grounds on Waitangi Day? No? Did anybody watch the live stream of the dawn service? Did anybody really mean to watch the live stream but never quite get around to it? At least one or two of us. So as we were thinking about tonight, I think in addition to going home with good information, we want to go home with good questions. And the question, the way I'm thinking of the question for tonight is, so what? So what do we do now as Christians about all the past? We can't change that. What are we going to do now? And we couldn't think of a better way of framing the discussion than this talk that Alistair Rees gave. Alistair has spent a decade serving faithfully at the marae up there on Waitangi Day with a number of others until he reached the point where somebody invited him to give this talk at the dawn service. So we're just going to spend 12 minutes. Watch this video. Thank you.
Kaonore ki te atua manga rongo ki te whenua. Whakaaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. Ko te mihi tuatai ki tō mātou e te rangi. E pā, he mihi whakawhetai tēnei ki a koe mō tēnei huhunga ki konei e tēnei rā hira hira. Nau mai, haere mai, whakatau mai I wanganui a tātou. I want to start with a prayer that was prayed here on the 6th of February 1840 by a rangatira ngā manu who signed Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And this was his prayer. Hara mai Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Hara mai ki tēnei ao. Hara mai mā ngā hua kei roto ki a koe. This was the optimistic moi moia of one of the rangatira that signed on that fateful day. There's always been prayer here at Waitangi. In fact, when Busby was here, there was a visiting dignitary from Sydney who said on his return, "It's rather too formal and religious for me. There are too many prayers at Waitangi." And I think perhaps today some might think the same thing. There was a prayer 100 years later in 1934 when Lord Bledisloe handed the land back to the nation. Standing in this place, that time ago he said, "Let Waitangi be a tatau pounamu for us all." And then he prayed, "Oh God, grant that the sacred compact here made in these waters may be faithfully and honourably kept for all days to come." Not many of us know that Waitangi began as a love story. Maukuku was hidden deep in a watery cave not far from here to hide her from unwanted suitors. And along came a handsome young man who a takaroa, and he heard a tangi deep in the watery cave, and he found his young puhi. That led to a marriage and led to a new whānau identity. In these days of realpolitik, it's hard to understand that the Tiriti o Waitangi was also originally a love story. Queen Victoria heard the tangi in the north of the rangatira, their discontent with the lawless settlers that were arriving here from Europe. It resulted in a covenantal agreement that some have likened to a marriage, and it too created a new identity. The formal arrangements took place over 2 days on the 5th and 6th of February in 1840. After the first problematic day on the 5th, the rangatira retired to Te Tau rangatira. There they had a Wānanga about the Queen's proposal. They were joined there by Karuwha, Te Wiramu, Henry Williams, and he put his word behind the treaty, and he said, "These are the Crown's intentions to you." He said, "This is Queen Victoria's act of love to you. She wants to ensure that you keep what is yours, your property, your rights and privileges, and those things you value." Framed by Williams, it was understood as a covenant. For as Hani Heke, the first signatory, said, "It is even as the word of God." This likening of it to Te Paipera Tapu, the revelation of God's love to creation. The scriptures also define the nature of that love. It's a cross-shaped ethic where one is willing to lay down their life for the other. A covenant of love such as the treaty is a sacrificial covenant. This is the kind of love that Williams referred to at Te Tau rangatira, an ethic that seeks the best outcome for the other. And to paraphrase the Apostle Paul, Love does not dishonor the other, and love never fails. In other words, Williams was committing Victoria's representatives to always seek the highest good for Māori. And if the treaty was an act of love by Victoria to Māori by extension, it also needs to be an act of love by our governments to Māori. Love is the hermeneutical portal for understanding the treaty. It's the interpretive key. Without love, it's an empty rhetoric and a legalistic doctrine. Like all love stories, it didn't take long for it to fall into a demise. Like all relational love stories, as I said this morning, Hollywood doesn't write our script. Ngā Manu's hopes were dissipating. In short time, the fruit of Waitangi began to wither, and Honeheke of flagpole fame understood this. Panekariao understood this as the shadows on the land began to shift. This great Te Rarawa chief who had likened this place to a place of hope. By the time that Governor Grey had set his troops over the Mangatawhiri in 1863, the fruit was positively rotten. The invasion was like an act of violence of an unfaithful spouse. In response, the influential Ngāti Hauā chief, the kingmaker Wiremu Tamihana, was moved to petition Queen Victoria, and he wrote, "Madam, the covenant came to this island, and you said in good faith that the Māori should retain their chieftainship, their mana, and their lands. These are your declarations. And now, O Mother, assert your authority, the authority which has been trampled on by Governor Grey, and give us back our land, our chieftainship, and our mana of which the colonists and the governor are seeking to deprive us." Tamihana declared that the Queen's authority had been trampled on by her representatives because they had trampled on the mana of the treaty and her intentions of love that were embedded within that. Our reading today of love is our instruction for working out Te Tiriti. We need to ask, where has the church been at this time? The third voice at the treaty table whose representatives had convinced Māori that the treaty was a good thing. Where was the church during the invasion of the Waikato? Where was the church at Pukahinahina? Where was the church at Parihaka in 1881 when Bryce invaded that place? In short, the missionaries and the settler church in the main abandoned Māori, and apart from a few lone voices of the land was confiscated and lost, the language disadvantaged and the mana of rangatira trampled upon, the settler church was silent. In other words, by our silence, we have been complicit in the betrayal. The recovery of the prophetic voice, which began in the 1980s in some sectors of the church, is hopefully gathering some momentum. And we need to ask, why should the church step up? And there are two reasons. One is our whakapapa with the treaty. The second reason is that the treaty is in part a theological document. It cannot be truly understood without some biblical understanding. Some of its genesis, its language and its covenantal intentions are drawn from Te Paipera Tapu. It is the church in these days when the treaty is under attack that we should be reminding the nation about its covenantal commitment. Listen to the words of Sir William Martin, our first Chief Justice and Church Missionary Society leader. He said, "We have covenanted with these people and assured of them the full privileges of the subjects of the Crown. This compact," he said, "is binding. It's irrevocable. We cannot repudiate it so long as we retain the benefit by which we have obtained from it." I ask us this morning, what is the benefit that we new settlers, we Pākehā, have obtained? I want to quote Sir Eri Taihakure Jure, another Anglican churchman. In 1989 he said, "But then We must never forget that the treaty is not just a Bill of Rights for Māori, it's a Bill of Rights for Pākehā too. It is a treaty that gives the Pākehā the right to be here, hence the descriptor tangata tiriti. I will also add it is a treaty for all who enter the tatau paunamu, the waharoa of reconciliation. This is a kairos moment for our nation. It's a time of mana trampling. It's a time to honour the treaty and unequivocally restore its mana. It's a time to restore the mana of the Crown. It is time also to restore the mana of Te Iwi Māori and all the signatories and the witnesses of this sacred covenant, even those of the Church. It's not too late that this sacred compact here made in these waters may be faithfully and honourably kept for all times. I have confidence that Lord Bledisloe prayer will be answered because covenants are a God thing and they attract his attention. And I'm finishing now. In times past, it might seem like the treaty is a dead thing. Think Judge Prendergast's simple nullity ruling in 1877. But it has always surprised us. Sir Apirana Ngata, at the opening of this great whare with hundreds of toa, he performed the Te Rauparaha haka and he sang out, "Kamate, kamate, ka ora, ka ora." It was dead, but now it lives. As I finish, I want to quote Whakahuihui Verko, who in 1990 said these prophetic words, "E ta taha o ngā wahi o Waitangi noho ana tātou I reira, e tangi ana tātou ka mahara kia hiro." Continuing on, he said, "We have come to this sacred ground because our tupuna left us this ground. As I remember the songs of the land, as I remember the history of our land, I weep here on the shores of the Bay of Islands. May God grant us the courage to be honest with one another, to be sincere with one another, and above all, to love one another in the strength of God. So I come to the waters of Waitangi to weep for what could have been a unique document in the history of the world of Indigenous people with the Pākehā, and I still have the hope that we can do it. Let us sit and listen to one another. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Nō re ki te atu e manga rongo ki te whenua.
Still get goosebumps listening to that. I think that's like my third time through now. Yeah, I think it sets a powerful framework through which for us to have that discussion about so what now? And so we want to give you all time to gather into little groups of 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever works for you. But gather into a group and have a discussion about this question that's up here on the screen. So what might it look like for followers of Jesus to honor God's hand onto Tiriti in practical ways that land in our churches and communities? I'd also ask that you consider nominating one person from your group to be able to feed back to all the rest of us some of the learnings that your group comes up with. So now's the time. Figure out a way to arrange yourselves, to chat with some people around you, and we'll give you a few minutes to have that korero. Alrighty. Let's gather back this direction, facing-ish. You don't actually have to move your seats if you don't want to. You can just turn. And so who'd like to share something from their group? We've got our lovely runner here with a microphone for you. Who's going to? Yeah, you can choose or Dallas can choose. Okay, then you lose. You choose. Snooze, you lose. You choose.
I got handed the mic, so we were trying to work out actually what we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes, which is, look, I think a couple of themes that came through is one we talked about, first thing we talked about was practical ways that land in our churches. It's sort of as if things are going to come to us rather than us having to be proactive. And I think one of the comments was that because we live in the South Island, perhaps those opportunities are not quite as prevalent as they might be in the North Island. So that's a reflection from some of the group. But then I think, we just really talked about our different churches' bicultural journeys or where they've got to, and sort of seeds of hope about how we could bring the things that we've learnt about over the last few weeks, but into the churches that we're part of. So that means promoting promoting more te reo in our worship services, engaging with people with the things that we perhaps learned here, and not leaving it to other people. So like the pastor or the leaders, it's something that we can all do. We've all got a responsibility for. Some of the thoughts we've had.
Got by. Very good. All right. Who's Dallas going to hand the mic to next?
Kia ora. Is that close enough? Cool. We collectively thought that we could call out racism or prejudice and speak te reo correctly would be helpful, and showing respect for the Māori culture, their worldview, traditions, language, and a bit of education wouldn't go amiss for all of us, and it's ongoing. If we have a growth mindset, then that's something we can put our mind to, and whether it's just for some of us learning a little bit more te reo or some of us doing a whole lot of learning, yeah.
Awesome. Next up.
Yeah, that's all good stuff, and I think it's a whole mix of a great big mix of things that we can do. One example that I remembered as we were talking was to do with the start of the new town of Pegasus, in just out of Christchurch, out of Woodend, and this is about empowerment. And a lot of my work has been in controversial jobs through my career, including overseas. And how do you empower people? And so we were meeting there in the planning stages with the local kaumātua, and they had some very big concerns about the town because of the history with Te Rauparaha. And so I went there on behalf of the developer to say, what do you people want? What's important to you if this town actually does go ahead? And it has gone ahead, as you'll know. There's a few thousand people live there now. So what do you want? And so they talked at quite some length about the history and their fears and what would be necessary for the town to be able to go ahead with their blessing. And to his credit, the owner of the company followed through the recommendations that came out of that day. And I felt I was able to be part of that, part of putting those recommendations together. And he took it on, and a whole number of things. So there's just one little practical way. And Christian faith came into it. There were a number of karakia and discussion of where God comes into the whole thing. And yeah, it became quite a moving and sacred kind of time, actually, which I was pleased about.
Cool. Yeah, hand it over to this group. Ripu.
Oh dear, this is very awkward. I think that what our group noticed.
A little bit closer to your mouth, please.
I think our group noticed one or two of the barriers to actually, even within our churches, and I'm thinking of your example, Nikki, where even though there is a momentum, there are one or two people who can just block it without doing anything very deliberate, but can simply block it. And so in a way, this is a question, how do we help those people to actually move a wee bit further? And I think that part of what we reflected on also is that the Christian church, in all its varied forms, has not always actually been very respectful of other ways of looking at things or other cultures and so on, and that it's perhaps a challenge for us to find the ways to get closer to those people who I think are scared, actually.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, everybody. We had 3 discussions on the covenant and wanting to know how do we learn Māori and plus working with Māori and Pākehā. The covenant first is really important. I believe our children should learn the Treaty of Waitangi. I've already done a seminar on the Treaty of Waitangi, and our pastor shared to me that before we can learn the treaty, we have to be, we need Jesus. We need Jesus so that we can understand the treaty. And there's a lot of grace. We need a lot of grace and mercy because of the breaching on both sides. It wasn't only the Pākehās, it was the Māoris too. They breached too. And unfortunately, being a Māori, I actually pushed the Māori side of me away. I didn't want to know anything about Māori, and I went to the Pākehā side. But as time went on, I had to learn both sides because it was affecting me bad. I end up in the world learning about not the good things of Pākehā, like my dad. I told my dad, "Dad, teach me how to speak Māori." And he said, "Nah, son, you just get out there and work hard." And I did, and it didn't work for me. I just got into trouble. I didn't get to prison though, and then I started realising there's more to life than what I was doing. And then my cousin actually told me about Jesus Christ, and I was so full of violence and hatred for my Māori people and for the Pākehā people because all the things that were happening to our Māori people, and plus the Māori people were doing the same, and I just couldn't understand. And that's why it was important that's why I say tonight it's important to learn the treaty, but through grace and mercy and also love, God's love, in Jesus' name. That's the only way I believe that we are going to understand the Treaty of Waitangi, because of God's love. And another lady shared that she wants to learn how to speak Māori. It's simple. It's when our pastor was teaching us how to speak Māori, he said, just be simple, just learn the little words like kia ora. And I didn't know how to reply back, and I used to just go, that was a joke too. Yeah, you just go like that. But I asked him, and I thought it was a dumb question, actually, but he said, just say kia ora back. And I went, oh, all these years? He said, yeah, just say kia ora. And I did. Next time I was waiting for somebody to say kia ora, and I said, kia ora. And the guy went, yeah, so, like, hoki mai means come, haere rā, go away, simple words like that. And it might be one word, 2 words, 3 words. You do that every day. By the end of the year, you'll be speaking Māori. But my Māori isn't very good, but I'm learning. I'm willing to learn to speak my Māori, but I'm beginning to be able to speak a sentence now. But when my brother speaks, oh, wow, he's fluent. And I go, what? And he goes, eh, and goes like that to me. And I said, oh, come on, brother, you were brought up with it. And he said, you should have listened. Yeah. But anyway, and yeah, just saying simple words like that, kia ora. And then the next one was, brother here was sharing about he went through the same experience like I did. And that was an encouragement because he sort of didn't like Māoris. And I thought, wow, yeah, I didn't like, some Pākehās I liked, but some of them I didn't. But now, with Jesus, hey, it's real easy. It's really easy because of what Jesus did on the cross. Hey, kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you so much. Ngā mihi.
Your comment, you should have just listened. I think, I love that. It leads into kind of what I want to say. We talked about how important it is to listen to the other voice. National conferences, they tended to be Westminster style of government, and if there was a small Maori contingent, the Maori were always voted down. And then when consensus decision making comes in, you listen to the other person. And then a wise decision can be made that helps everybody. Really, really listen.
Yeah.
I was just taking notes as everyone was talking before and trying to pull out some of the things that were being said. And some of them was, I just said, ensure both parties are actually being heard. But to hear, you've actually got to listen. And then when you listen, you have to listen with a view to understand. You can't just listen and let it fall on a dead head. So you have to be willing. And I think all these things come under what God instructs us to do. And then when we listen to his word, as he says, he's here to set all men free. So therefore, we're all equal. There's no difference. Doesn't matter who you are. Be teachable. God asks us to be teachable. So therefore, we need to listen and take on some te reo. We're fortunate in our church where we do include te reo prayer, te reo songs. And so songs are actually the easiest way to learn te reo. And come together to share experiences and be graceful, be purposeful, such as we've just had these 4 weeks. So if we want to be purposeful in our church or in God's hands to be followers, like that says up there, then we have to be purposeful in our own journey as well. And listen to testimonies, because people's stories are important. And it also has to come from leadership. If leadership doesn't put that into our meetings and say, this is what we are, this is who we are, this is how we're going to behave, and this is how we're going to be for our future, then it won't work. Leadership, God says those who are in leadership have great responsibility. And so we're all leaders in a way, so therefore we all have that responsibility.
Yeah, awesome. Did we cover all the groups, or we got one more? There we go.
So I'll start with what Rochelle said last, which was that we must do things the way Jesus would have done them. And so when it comes to the marginalized, what did Jesus do? And I think we also talked about educating, speaking up, being open to the conversations, not keeping quiet when people put Māori down, and, you know, and sharing the things that we've learned, because that's probably the biggest problem, is that most people don't know. And so they come from sorry, I can't think in English. So they come from a position of ignorance. And so very often just overcoming the ignorance helps them, and then you can have better conversations.
Do we get there? Yeah. Oh, that's all some great reflections. I noticed that this group actually did practice listening. You spent some good time listening, and I think that's such an important skill for us to develop. So thank you for that. And related to what somebody else said, one thing that really stood out to me from Alistair's talk this time was, if we are silent, we're complicit in the betrayal of the Māori. So it doesn't mean we have to be rude or ugly, but it means we have to learn how to speak up, and sometimes speak up on behalf of others. So we're going to move into, thank you so much for sharing that. That saved us a lot of time and energy trying to prepare all the stuff that you should go and do, because you already know it. But just in case you need a few more ideas, we're going to run through, Dallas is going to take us through this next section. I'll let you explain it.
Yeah. So I'm just going to run through, we've got 20 things here, because it's one thing to have this kōrero on the level of, like, you know, history, kind of conceptually, intellectually, all of that kind of stuff. But it's really important for us to consider, how does this actually land for us personally? How does this land in our whānau, across our tables? How does this land in our churches? What are some practical things that we can do? Especially if we're still carrying, which is quite normal, and hopefully we've been kind of like, we have been talking about this throughout the whole time. Part of feeling overwhelmed can kind of just keep us in the sense of feeling overwhelmed and not really knowing where to go or what to do with it. So here's some practical things, and actually, like Bruce just said, a lot of you have actually already mentioned some of them. So number one, localize the history, the story of your church, congregation, and relate it back to what Te Tiriti promised. How much of you know the history of your church, whether it be the denomination or whether it be the actual physical? Also bear in mind that, especially living down here in the Te Waiponamu, the South Island, that some Māori will come blonde and blue-eyed as well. Some Māori up north will come red-headed with freckles as well, on the east coast especially. So just be aware of that. Yep, next. Thank you, Mr. Soundman, please. Oh, right. Maybe Okay, we've already done that one. Most churches seem to be led by Pākehā Europeans, with Māori involvement in senior leadership and Māori attendance possibly around about 3 to 5%. Why is that? Just a question. Is your church leadership known by name within the local community? So there was just a comment there about earlier about living in the South Island and how it might be a little bit harder to connect with the Māori communities. I see the point. I definitely do, because the demographic here is obviously very different to the North Island. However, there are marae here, and they do have a lot of community activities and a lot of things that actually you can connect with and get involved in, jump on Facebook pages. They have events. that are actually open to the public. Rehua Marae on Springfield Road, okay, super central. They have, for example, at Christmas time, a Christmas thing. Santa comes, it's all on, and anyone can go to that. Even just going to things like that could actually be a really great way to connect with local Māori people and the local Māori community. Even going along to something like that, for example, or any other Māori event, and offering to serve. Offering to serve could be a really great thing for a whole church community to think about doing. Like, how could we go along and serve the Māori community and be a presence there, just like Matua Alistair Rees does, as Bruce mentioned. Actually, on that, Matua Alistair Rees, he started a organisation called Karuwha, which was the name for Henry Williams, Four Eyes. Karuwha, and so they take a group of predominantly Pākehā people. Has anyone done Karuwha, actually? No. They take a group of predominantly Pākehā people to Waitangi every year. Every single year. And it's great. They go around the significant sites around Waitangi, and they also serve on the marae, on Te Tī marae down the bottom. Not the flash one up the top there where he was doing his sermon out the front of, but down the bottom Te Tī marae, because there's a whole lot happening down at Te Tī marae as well. And they clean the toilets, they help out in the kitchen, they do the dishes and all that kind of stuff. They've been doing that for about, I want to say a long time, 15, 20 years. And of course, when the story's pretty amazing. When they first started going there, of course, there was a whole lot of basically, what are you Pākehā doing there? Like, what's your agenda? What do you want? Etc., etc. But they've just gone back year after year, and the groups have gotten bigger and bigger, and they've just faithfully served. They've come in to serve the people there. That's been their intentional effort. And now Alistair was doing the sermon in the dawn service. Bishop Kito, who was on the DVD last week, he's the Anglican Māori bishop for that area. He would normally have done the dawn service. I feel like he's been doing that every dawn service for however long. But he last year asked Matua Alistair to do it. And if you didn't catch that, Matua Alistair's a Pākehā man. He got absolutely, what's the word? Gee. Okay, yes. After that, after his sermon, especially referring to Tiriti as a love story, and obviously couching it in scripture and all of that kind of stuff. We all loved it. There's definitely a very significant part of the New Zealand community that hated it, and he has been torn down on social media and other places. But Alistair and I used to work together, and so he and I were messaging it on Waitangi Day, and he was expecting that. He was expecting that to happen. I went off track. Where did we go? You got to be bold. Lots of prayer. If we were supposed to do this together, why aren't we? And what should that look like? Still no sense of connection. Ask Māori Christians at the local marae how you might do this together in order to build a meaningful, authentic, reciprocal relationship. Does the response that we are multicultural start to sound like an excuse? I do think it does, actually, sometimes. Not to start with the Indigenous people Te Tiriti was signed with as a good foundation, as a basis for that inclusivity. It's an important question to ask. It's an important kōrero to have. Yes, we are a multicultural nation. Te Tiriti allowed for all other cultures to be here. But in the places and spaces and conversations I've been in over the years, it definitely comes across sometimes as a bit of an excuse not to have to address historical things, and also really engage with what the purpose of Te Tiriti was about in its origins. Songs in Te Reo Māori, you guys do that? Great. Yep, next. Oh, yeah.
About the Ask Māori Christians on a local marae. I feel like there's like maybe a wall that people might not associate Christians on the marae, right? Like, how do we know if they're on the marae, if they're Christians? Or maybe some might even think that that there's no relation to the marae and to faith, or Christian faith. So like they might see the marae as like Māori God stuff. So like that kind of assumes some stuff, but that maybe some people here have some questions about. I'm not sure, or at least know some people that have some questions about that. But I guess what we're saying is, you're saying that that's typical? There will be Māori Christians on a marae?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
And just to flip the question, maybe, just to be a little bit provocative, I'm not always sure that there's Christians in a church. Right? So, yes, I get the question and I get the point, and I get the reservations, and it doesn't quite fit with our current paradigm of maybe where God resides and what God might be doing outside of the established four walls. But He is. But the same question still applies, even though I'm being cheeky, because I am and I'm a little bit tired. You know, I do come to church sometimes and I'm like, oh, okay, you're here.
Mr.
Yeah.
Cheeky.
Yeah.
So, in my mind, Maori are quite formal in introductions and in letting you in. So, how do you do that?
Oh, yeah, good question. So, yeah, of course, there'd be times like, say, tangi or special kind of hapu or iwi, hui that are happening where, yeah, you probably wouldn't want to show up at that point because you're not part of the rōpū necessarily that they're welcoming on. Hence why I gave the example of when they're doing community-based events and things that they do open up to the public, you're more than welcome to go to those. And it's a much easier on-ramp, actually, which is what you need, right? You actually need easier on-ramps that feel just more realistic and safer and more comfortable, knowing that often a lot of the reason why people don't do these things is because they're feeling fearful or uncomfortable, or they don't know what's going to happen or what's expected of them, or they might get ridiculed for not saying kia ora properly, or all of those things. So yes, there's definitely formal things that maybe you wouldn't attend to. Yeah, let's go next. I feel like we've done that one. Maybe let Māori lead the service. Whew. That'd be interesting. You'd probably need to, like, you know, add another hour on the end or something like that. But that's probably what you'd need to do, considering cultural worldview and different approaches to time and different value of time, right? But that's not wrong. It's just different. Do you know your local history? We talked about that. Have you engaged with local Māori leaders? I feel like we've covered that one. Yeah, we can go next. Engaging with local mana whenua, the hapu or the iwi that hold mana whenua status here, which on the first night we talked about being Ngai Tua Huriri, which is out in Tuahiwi. Let me just throw a caveat in there though. It's one, because this frustrates me actually, even as Māori. It's one thing to say we need to engage with local mana whenua and like engage with local Māori. Like, yes, ideally, great, idyllic world, that would be awesome. It is actually really hard, even for Māori as well. So let's not paint this picture like it's all like straightforward. It's really not. So it's going to be a challenging journey. But however, to still have the question there to consider or something to aim to, I think is still really important. Are there equal opportunities for leadership positions in your church? Have you asked Māori what their aspirations are, how you might work to grow and fulfill and resource those? Plan a church outing to a marae or a local community thing like we just talked about. And the last two are create. Now, I just use the word alongside as group. You can use whatever word you want, allies or whatever you want. You can call it whatever you want. But create a group that operates outside of the main structured function of the church and discuss what Te Tiriti honouring church should look like. And if you have Māori within that, let them decide how that's run and what the agenda is and all of those kind of things. Sit around in a circle, introduce each other to ask the hard questions. How are you working alongside serving the local Māori community? What are their needs? Do you know that community? Do you know any Christians within that community? That's not just a talking point. That is also a resource that you guys are going to get at the end to go away and have continue to consider what it could look like. Are there any thoughts or questions about any of that stuff? Now you have no excuse. Yeah.
I have a concern about this on behalf of Maori people. There's a whole lot more Pākehā churches than Maori churches or marae, and that's very demanding of the resources, people resources that they have. And I remember maybe 45 years ago when I started doing anti-racism workshops, not racism. We were challenged then to think we have to do the hard work and not expect Maori people to do it for us. So that's a concern I have for our whole area. And maybe some of us have to be further along the journey than we are and take some responsibility for partnering and not just asking for their help.
That is a very, very good point. The only reason I'm here is because I know Jono, I like Jono, and I trust him. That's the only reason I said yes to him. But normally I wouldn't do it, actually, because I actually really believe that Pākehā should be educating Pākehā. And although there's a place for Māori to speak into Pākehā's journey, understanding education and all of that, the toll it takes on Māori, especially because we're a minority and because we're often the, let's be real flippant, the brown face in the majority, then we'll often get asked questions. That's not a comment on someone's intention or their heart as to why they're asking the question. I'm not talking about that. But you do get asked the question a lot, and you just, and the toll it can take on you, having to be that one lonesome or the very few brown voice in your mostly Pākehā church, does take its toll. So maybe 5 years ago I would have gone, yep, I'll help you. Now I'm like, hang on, who are you? Who's in your congregation? Who are we speaking to? And who else are you empowering within your own lot to educate yourselves? Otherwise it becomes something that we've still got to carry. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Because I don't think that many Pākehās show up to serve. And so if you really are serious about it, that's how you do it.
Personal here. Sorry. I feel now, after spending a lot of time, I taught in Tokoroa. I'm from Tauranga. As I said, I did my PA year in a native school, it was still called at that time. There's a lot of things now at my age that I don't think it's my place to do such and such. And I really struggle with it because I love kapahaka, I love action songs. I don't believe it's my place anymore to be part of it. I do it at home in front of YouTube, but it's not my place to be part of it now. And that's just a really personal feeling that I've come to. Yeah.
Oh, I know what's happening. Can somebody flick to the next slide there? I don't have a clicker. One upon a time. The translation of that is once upon a time. So I just kind of offered, I thought it might be useful to kind of reflect on 3 stories of my experiences, not to hold me up as an example. Many of you could probably tell even better stories, but just that as you go into this journey, you might have already gotten to the point where you're using some te reo at church, you're singing some songs in te reo, great. But at some point in time on this journey, you're going to start running up against a clash of cultures that's going to feel uncomfortable for some, if not everybody in the room. And so I want to just share 3 short vignettes from my time leading a church on this journey. We used to do a Tiriti series every year. We'd spend 3 to 4 weeks on that. But I stepped into leadership as a volunteer, but on the final day of the staff that were present at the church who'd set it all up leaving, we had a lot of planned farewells and some messages from people, and all that was great. And all of a sudden, completely off the schedule, we heard a loud voice from the back of the auditorium break into a haka. And we looked back, and it was one of our good friends who'd been a member of that church for quite a number of years. And he was, bare-chested and dressed for the part, and he just cut into it. And there were some people who was like, he shouldn't be doing that. There were some people who actually said that to us afterwards, not at the time. So I wonder, what would you have done? Ask him what it meant. Good.
When my daughter was married over in Australia, a group of the people that were there did a haka, and she said that was the most moving part of her wedding ceremony. I wasn't expecting it. It was completely unplanned as far as the bride and groom knew, but a group of the friends just stood up at the reception and did a haka, and she was absolutely blown away with it, yeah.
That was my response as well. I was blown away. I really wanted to rip off my shirt and join him, but I didn't know the words at that.
I was going to say, if I knew the haka, I'd haka back to with him.
Yeah.
If you know it, yeah.
So another story. We were beginning to share, and we had a few Māori who'd started coming, including a much older Komatua and his kuya. They were both close to 80, and they had joined us as we were doing our treaty series. And I was telling the story of Parihaka. And it's a pretty traumatic story, right? And partway through, well, actually, I got through the story, but I was still not quite finished my talk yet. And the Komatua raised his staff up, and I knew just enough to know that means he wants to speak. He wants to get up and speak. What's he gonna say? Do I have any business telling the story? I've heard some people say that. It's not your story. What is he going to say? What do you do? What would you do? Let him speak. This is the thing. Even if we have te reo throughout every element of the service, we have to recognize that the structure itself is Pākehā. And it's not what is traditional on a marae. On a marae, when a Komatua raises his staff, you let him speak. And so I opted to go that way with fear and trembling as he got up to speak. I breathed a sigh of relief when he thanked me for the talk and told me that his wife, his dear wife, his kuya, had tipuna ancestors who'd been at Parihaka. And he was glad to have their story shared. Imagine if I missed out on the beauty of that, knowing she had a personal connection to that story. That was really powerful, and maybe you can tell it was a little bit moving for me too, right?
But Bruce, some people might say, we're not on the marae, we're in a church. What about our tikanga in the church?
Whose church is it?
Well, I mean, every church has their own tikanga, right?
Yeah. No, this is the thing, is if you really want to honor Māori, you might have to think about what's their tikanga for Christian service. Are you going to get up and do a waiata after you do your talk? Are you going to start with a proper pepeha to introduce yourself so people know who you are? All sorts of things that you got to think through and make sure that you're listening to the voices. Don't overload the Māori among you with constant series of questions about, did I do it right? Is this the right thing? Like, many of them are feeling like they're just exhausted because of being asked constantly to be the one representative for the entire Māori race. But I got to tell you one more story that was a really hard one. Again, it was another year we were doing a treaty series, but we also had that day a baptism planned, and a young girl, about 12 years old, getting baptized that day. And so she had invited a lot of her family and friends to come along. So these are visitors. Some of them were not even Christians at all. But we were having a family service, and we told the story of Naboth's vineyard acted out by the children. We had a reader, and then everybody acted. So do you know the story of Naboth's vineyard? So very, 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 very briefly, King Ahab, Jezebel, King Ahab wanted the vineyard next door. Naboth owned it. King said, sell it to me. Naboth said, no, God forbid that I should sell you the land of my ancestors. And we did a little exercise where we were asking the question of, like, what is the impact of that on those people decades later? Let's say that the two families got together and started sharing their stories. And one family was the descendants of Ahab and Jezebel. Oh, sorry, I didn't quite finish the story, did I? Jezebel, after that meeting, arranged a trick to have him killed. And they took possession of the land. And so it's a pretty difficult, challenging story, but what would you say as the descendants of Ahab and Jezebel? What would you want to say over here to the descendants of Naboth? And what would you, as the descendants of Naboth, want to say to the descendants of Jezebel? Sorry? Right. But the whole point of the talk was to acknowledge that there are impacts that go well beyond the historical events that can carry right through to the present. Right? People still can suffer the impacts in the present of what a decision that was made generations ago. At that point in time, a Maori man, a bit of a troubled man, who'd been part of our congregation for quite a number of years, decided he wanted to come up and talk to the people. Now again, it's another one of those situations. What would you do? We'd just been talking about trauma and hardship for Maori. Could I deny him the right to speak? I don't know. He's got a bit of a history. Is he safe? Well, he got up in front of this group of many of them strangers to our church who'd never been there before, and a lot of children as well, friends of the girl getting baptized, and he told about how he'd been raped by the white man as a child. Now what would you do?
Tell us what you did.
I stood there next to him. I went up and stood next to him, and I let him continue. In my mind, I was going, well, the damage has already been done. I can't take back the story. Though I am a little bit nervous about where he might go next. I know a bit of his history. And he talked about how he'd been imprisoned and been through the system and all the impacts that had happened to him. And I'm like, this is exactly what we're talking about. He's suffering the consequences of land dispossession, of families who've had their treasures stripped away. But man, let me tell you, after that Sunday, we got together as a staff and we had a hashing out of that. Because the children's pastor said, how dare you let him speak like that in front of the children? How dare you endanger the children? Why didn't you stop him? I agree. It was traumatic for the children. If they didn't know what it was, many of them never even asked. It's traumatic for the visitors. And we had to think through there were two competing values, both important. And for one to be honored, the other had to be sacrificed a little bit. Now, it only goes so far when it comes to the children, but for one to be honored, the other had to be sacrificed. Which one would you sacrifice? Thankfully, that opened up some amazing conversations as the mother of the daughter getting baptized talked to the families who'd come to visit afterwards and told them the history of this guy and how we had graciously opened up the doors even though we knew it was rough. He came sometimes high. He came sometimes a bit disruptive and liked to do some very showy dances when we were playing music, often right up front if he could. But he was just being him. He was being who he had been created to be. And he loved to worship, and it was all beautiful. But we had to learn to walk in some really uncomfortable spaces as a result. So think ahead. Prepare for the unexpected ways that cultures might clash. And decide ahead of time, what am I going to do? Am I going to honor the people of this land, or am I going to hold to what I think is right in this moment? That's just 3 little vignettes. They're just examples, and I'm sure, like I said, many of you could tell stories as well. So I just think, it is hard. It is hard when 2 worldviews clash. It happens a lot more often than you think. Often one worldview just silences themselves because they feel like this is not my place. I'm not welcome here. That's a pretty somber note. Somebody's going to wrap us up with something a bit more positive, eh? Oh, yeah, who's doing this part here? Is that you? Or scoot ahead.
I've got a bit of a question for you all, because I struggle, with the fact the scripture says when a tongue is given, that it's interpreted. And often I find in many services where they're trying to introduce Māori language to reo, it's never translated into English. And I'm just wondering, what should I do about that? I feel uncomfortable with that at times,
A good place to start is telling people that you're uncomfortable about it.
Yeah.
And for that very reason, But acknowledge too, for me it's important too, especially as a Māori person saying it, to just kind of stand back and let them do what they want to do, let them speak in the way they want to speak, and just kind of like let it go. Look, they have spent decades, centuries listening to us when it wasn't their language. I think it's okay for us to kind of like sit in the discomfort of like, I have no idea what you just said, but I honor you for saying it.
Is it disrespectful to ask them to translate?
I think you have to kind of know the person. Yeah. You wanted to say something? Please.
This is during a tangi, a Māori tangi. I don't know if there are certain people that don't do it, Māori people that don't do it, but during the tangi, the last night, the Māori culture, on the last night they have a sharing time, and you can say whatever you like. You can call them all the names under the earth, or you can preach, you can say anything. So that's the best time to go, the last night to a tangi, and just speak up, just say anything.
Righto. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you, Jono, or Bruce might want to jump in here. I don't know. I'm not a theologian. I don't know if many of us are really. No. So I'd want to know what the context of the scripture is when it talks about the interpretation of tongues. So you jump in there, and then I'll jump in with the story.
Yeah. So that would be in context of speaking a language that's come over you that you have no idea what you're saying, and that someone else would be given a gift to interpret that for everyone else. But if someone speaks another language, like Te Reo Māori, and they want to stand up and speak a proverb or just anything that, as a word over the congregation or in response to what they've heard or something, that's not the same as being overcome by a tongue. So I wouldn't think that needed to be translated in the context of what Paul's talking about, spiritual gifts. But I do hear you, and I think that I understand. That's something that that as a pastor I've come to appreciate more. The rate that or the amount of te reo that the general Pākehā doesn't know, and then kind of are maybe like expected to know without it having translated, so that they can know. But again, I think there's it's sort of a balance, because I understand the idea of sitting in the discomfort is not a bad thing. In fact, I think I preached on that on Sunday, that God might be leading you into uncomfortable places. But yeah, I think it's a different scenario of what you brought up. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I did wonder that. I've had that happen to me before. I think I shared it in whenever previous time. where I introduced myself and said a prayer into Te Reo Māori and all of that. And then, and then a guy come up to me afterwards, actually handed me a scripture, to me, and said, basically, you shouldn't be doing that because people can't understand you. And now I want to have grace towards him, and I did have grace towards him actually, because I'm like, okay, for whatever reason, whether it be your legalistic religious mindset, or whether it be your inability to cross the road to someone else's world, or whether it be your just small heart, I'm going to show grace to you. And I did in that moment. My wife, however, later, she didn't show grace to him. To me, she didn't say anything to him. My Pākehā wife, by the way. But it definitely... So if I can't be myself and my authentic self and the way God's created me, and that goes for any of us, regardless of what culture we come from, if we can't actually celebrate in the house of God, in a Christian community, and wherever where God is and resides, and we celebrate the name of God and lift up the name of God and honour the name of God as his created children, if I can't be fully myself, appreciating that there are times when you shouldn't be fully yourself. Do you know what I mean? Like, we need to have character, of course. But if I can't do that in a quote-unquote Christian setting, like where can I do it? And so essentially what that guy was asking me, really, if you boil it down, was, can you stop being you? Can you stop being the person that God made you to be in this setting? Just for now, because it's making me uncomfortable. And in the meantime, like, what about me? You know? And it's not about a, tit for tat thing, or like, let's try and debate this out. But somehow, like Bruce was saying, we need to walk the discomfort together, that in a way that honours us both, where we can both cross the road to each other. And bearing in mind, that is going to be harder for Māori. It just is. It's actually not, we don't come at the starting line equally. We come to that conversation, and many others like it, already, I don't want to say disadvantaged, what's a better word, something like that. Already on the back foot, having to like think about all of the different ways we have to say what we're going to say, and how are you going to receive that, and are you going to get offended, and how many filters am I going to have to use so that, you know, you still feel comfortable about us even having this conversation. Like, we're doing so much work in our hearts and our souls that not necessarily other people are having to do, or they're doing different kind of work. Yeah, that's all I'd want to say to that. And so after that, did I stop speaking Te Reo Māori? I might have just spoke more. And you might say that I have a rebellious heart. Well, but that's between me and God. But I did, actually, partly because my wife was like, don't you dare stop talking Te Reo Māori in this hui. So I didn't. And that guy didn't talk to me again for the rest of the time.
Kia ora, Dallas. I just want to, can you come back up here for a second? I just want to totoko Dallas, and what he said earlier. I knew that inviting him here was going to be hard for him, but because it's not an easy thing to do, to bare your soul and to have the weight of all of our questions and expectations and wanting answers to all these sort of things thrust upon him. But I know that I also know that he's really good to have.
I'm saved.
But I just really wanted to honor you, because I know that it hasn't been easy. It's not an easy thing to do. To be vulnerable in front of people you don't know. And I really appreciate you doing this for me, for us. I just love you for that. Now also, we were originally planned this fourth night, we got 10 minutes left here. We we kind of thought like it'd be really great to have the final night just like where we can kind of workshop with some karakia and learn some things that we can like integrate into our services if you're not already doing it. Maybe learn a few different waiata that we could take with us, and we can implement things like share some things that other people are doing in other places. That was kind of the aim for the fourth week, but we obviously had so much left over from the first three things of wanting to share and really wanting to have the groundwork and group work and the kōrero amongst ourselves. So we're going to do a song that we can close with. If you know it, great. If you don't know it and you want to learn it or well, make sure that we have your email. If you didn't put your email down the last couple of weeks, make sure we have it, because we're also going to get all these slides out to all of you from each of the weeks, and other links to rewatch it again if you wanted to go back and listen to something else. And and I can include things like the song, the podcast, and also some shine on Bruce. He was a guest on my show as well, so I'll link that in there too. Different topic, but all the same. Should we close with this song? You want to come help me sing it now? Cool. Etiariki. It's on the slides.
Maybe the next one, man. Or the one before that.
Who knows Etiariki? Cool. Okay. So not a lot of you do then. All right. Well, that's good. Here.
Oh, jeez.
Sure. It's you, yeah.
Let's stand up.
Etiariki whakaranga mai rā kia mātou. Etiariki titiro mai rā kia mātou. Tēnei mātou tamariki e whakapono ana mātou ki a koe. Te tamaiti wairua tabu e. Up from the top. From the top. Te ariki whakarongo mai rā kia mātou. Te ariki titiro mai rā kia mātou. Tēnei mātou tamariki e whakapono ana mātou ki a koe. Te matua te tamaiti wairua tapu e. Te matua te tamaiti wairua tapu e. Te matua te tamaiti wairua tapu e. Any last words? Yeah.
We were going to give you a little bit of time to do this, but because it is close to 9 o'clock, we'll just stop here. But before you leave here tonight, find someone and tell them one step.
Is that on? Yeah. That's just lower.
Tell them one step you're going to take in the very near future as a result of this. So we're going to finish, but do that before you leave here. Find someone and tell them one step. Okay? Kia ora.
It's like now.
Yeah, now. Go ahead. You can do it.
One small step.